And we're live! Hello all, and welcome back to Sigil Spotlight. My name is always Mr. Harlan Guthrie, and I am here with the fantastic Ellen. How you doing, Ellen?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. You like how I kind of turned to you as if you're sitting next to me? So that when people are watching, they're like, oh yeah, he's totally sitting next to her, and they're not on different sides of... Well, I guess we're not on different sides of the world. Different sides of a small portion of North America.
Of the Great Lakes. We're on different sides of the lakes.
How was your American Thanksgiving?
It was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, we host, so we had all of the clan over. It was a good time.
The clan?
The clan.
Nice.
That's like we're not actually like a clan. Like none of us
it's
are Scottish.
It's a safe word. You're good.
But,
You're fine.
Yeah.
Did you do turkey, ham?
We do turkey, although we had a couple last-minute people say they were coming, so we made one of our guests put together a little ham too to round out the meat.
You gotta have multiple meats. It's the way to go. You never know. People, you might devour the turkey on one go. You never want to have less on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, like normally we buy like a couple pounds more than they say you should for turkey, because we brine our own turkey. But then, like more and more people are like, "Oh, actually, we can make it this year. We can make it this year," and all of a sudden, our extra poundage ran out.
Dry brine or like wet brine?
Wet
Soak in
brine.
water. Wet brine? I always do a dry brine. I'm excited because I didn't get to do a turkey this year for Thanksgiving. Canadian Thanksgiving, that me and our guest today share. But I'm excited because I'm going to do turkey for Christmas as well. Although some people don't do turkey for Christmas. I think they do like goose.
We usually do. We always did like ham growing up for Christmas dinner because like nobody wants to deal with like cooking a turkey when they also want to like hang out and do presents and things.
Drink.
Yeah.
And drink. Actually, that's a great point. I have a giant ham too. Maybe a ham would be on the menu. It could be pretty fun. Maybe I'll do both. Maybe we'll do all of it.
There you go.
Or maybe I'll do tortillere, which is also sort of a French Canadian twist. Which who knows? Maybe me and our next guest will share as well. But before we bring him on, we want to talk about any news. What kind of news do we have coming up?
It's been pretty slow actually in terms of like announceable news.
Not slow.
Well,
it's
not
been
slow.
pretty.
Okay.
It's been ruminating. It's been baking. Like a souffle.
A lot of us are Americans, so we've been on vacation.
That's right. No, the sigil behind the scenes has been like a souffle. It's been rising in the oven, and you don't want to open the door because it could deflate. You know?
Basically, there is a lot of stuff coming.
Basically.
Yeah, we should start having some things that we can show soon, but not quite yet.
Well, we do have a few things that we can talk about that are exciting that are coming up with our next guest. So without further ado, let us bring on the wonderful, talented, you might know him as Venatus Vinco, but this is, of course, Mr. John Stevens. John, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Pretty great. Do you have tortilla around Christmas or holidays, or is that just...
I love tortilla. My kids go to the Acadian school, so we're kind of versed in French culture.
Oh, fantastic.
But at Christmas, we have kind of a traditional meal on Christmas Day of turkey and stuff. And then on Boxing Day, which is, do they have that in the States? It's a Canadian thing anyway.
It's on the calendars, but nobody celebrates it.
So on Boxing Day, the other family comes over and we have a big brunch, which is actually my favorite thing.
Because it's the French-Canadian side of it.
Just because it's brunch. Yeah.
Oh. Do you do that like I forget the name of it, but there's a French Canadian the bacon where it's like really really crispy and there's a name for it. I can't remember the name of it, but
no.
Do you guys do that?
No, we don't do a lot of that stuff.
Oh, okay.
But
my grandmother's French Canadian, which is why. So there's a lot of like escargot on the night before, and a lot of that like super crispy bacon and tortilla and stuff like that, which is like the super rich goose fat, all that kind of stuff is like the French Canadian cooking, which is honestly pretty fantastic. It's like sort of Canada's version of Southern cooking is like that rich French Canadian foie gras, like goose fat laden stuff. So highly recommend if you are in Canada to definitely divulge into that. But enough about cooking. John, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit what you do as well as your sort of role with Sigil?
Sure. Yeah, I asked Aaron, "What do I do exactly?" And he said, "Jack of all trades," and I think that's fair. So my primary work is on VTT, so working a lot on Roll20 and Foundry. In fact, on both, one of my main jobs is to take stuff that's in print because I have a kind of a background in RPG publishing. It can use InDesign and get it into a usable format for the VTT. So I do that for both platforms quite a bit. And that's been a lot of fun. On the publishing side, just some layout work here and there, graphics, make a lot of the tokens you see on the VTT, and do a lot of the artwork, sizing and stuff for VTT sizing. Basically, if there's a job to be done and they need someone to say, well, I can learn that, and I learn it and do it.
AKA the backbone of making everything sort of function properly.
Kind of.
Well, it's true, though. That's one of the most important jobs that people often do not recognize properly, you know? So often you see a beautiful piece of artwork in your, Roll20 or Foundry, and you're like, oh man, that artwork is by so-and-so, and that's really fantastic. But you never think about, okay, yeah, but how do you take that piece of artwork? How does it actually get into the game? How does it become functionable? How does it have all those like stats maybe even assigned to it and all that kind of stuff? There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we, as the horrid consumers, don't even realize. I'm flogging myself. No, but that's fantastic. And being a bit of a jack of all trades in this industry is extremely useful, because there are a lot of steps within end to from beginning, that a lot of people don't realize or understand. So,
yeah, when you publish on the VTT, I'm finding it's like starting over in some ways. You have the content, but if you had your content and you put it into InDesign or a similar program, you have to add all the headings, all the formatting, make sure the graphics are in such a place that things don't run over pages and all that. Then you're starting over with the VTT. You're publishing a brand new product in a lot of way in a different medium. So you have the content and you have the art, but those things by themselves need to be laid out in a similar fashion using an entirely different language.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's something that I find can be really intimidating to a lot of people, learning new things all the time, and myself at times, absolutely. But it's also so rewarding to be like, oh, I know how to do that now. You know what I mean? When you're like, oh, I'm going to learn how to automate this little thing, and then you spend a few hours doing it. And there are certain brains that I find are wired to want to constantly learn new things like that. And I equally kind of sympathize with that mentality where you're like excited to sort of try something new all the time.
It'll be interesting to see, like with the learning how to convert things from print. So Sigil is starting to develop more things like independently and then bring them to VTT at the same time. It'll be interesting to see how that changes, with VTT essentially having their foot in the door in those initial design phases as we start talking about, the book layout and things like that. It'll be interesting to see how that.
I know I was laying something out the other day and I was like, okay, I'm going to be converting this to HTML at some point. So I've already made little adjustments and tags inside the InDesign file that will make that job just that little bit easier the next.
A little bit easier, spread it all out. So, John, obviously you have a lot of different hats. Some of the hats you've been wearing are specifically in the writing and creation of RPG settings and books, and people may recognize your name from the $9,000 unlocked stretch goal from our S5E campaign for the 9 Worlds Kickstart Adventure PDF that you are sort of putting together now, and I believe it's already being playtested as we speak, correct?
Yeah, we ran a couple of playtest games already of the 9 Worlds S5E adventure. Super fun. 9 Worlds is kind of a Norse take on cyberpunk. So imagine that classic cyberpunk city, and you have all those Japanese characters everywhere in neon. We'll just replace those with Norse runes, add a few beards and tattoos, and you're kind of going. You've got what we're going for here. It's super fun. You take on the role of a Viking, which is kind of like a Shadowrunner, except a little more aggressive, and take on jobs. And it has a cool altered carbon kind of feel in that the gods are not gods. They're people who figured out the secret of immortality, and so they live up high, at the top of this space elevator called the Bifrost, and at the bottom is the megacity where all peons live. And underneath, in the roots of that big space elevator, is there's underworlds that you can explore and things like that. So it has kind of 3 layers, as you will, and kind of a nice feel, but it's all a twist on the classic Norse mythology. So if you see Norse mythology, you ever see that world tree diagram where the gods live at the top and then the trunk and then down. So it's kind of a sci-fi cyberpunk take on all that. So not immortal in the mystical, magical sense, although there is magic and different races and things, ancestries. But
are the enemies you're fighting typically human, or is there sort of like a monster angle too? I'm out of curiosity.
Yeah, it just depends on the run, I guess, on the job that you do. In this adventure, there is kind of a I don't want to spoil anything, but there is kind of a twist monster that appears that you have to figure out what to do.
That sounds so exciting. Are you somebody who, obviously this is a setting that you came up with, is history near and dear to your heart, or is it something that you kind of like the aesthetics of, so then you learned more about it? And I find when we talk to people, there's usually those are the two schools. Either they were diehard into history and they made a setting from that, or they're like, man, that's cool, I got to read everything about Norse mythology.
Sure. I was a fan of it as a kid. I read a lot of mythology books, Greek and Norse particularly. So I was versed in it already. But I love the aesthetics. You start to see these movies coming out now and shows about Vikings and different things like that. And you're like, okay, I can work with that. And then there's something just about the, I don't know, the kind of the nihilistic way of it, like it's, the fates and, we're going to die with our hearts in our hands and whatever. And so that there's just something that translates well, I think, to a tabletop game as well.
No, absolutely. It reeks of adventure.
No, that's really interesting. So at one point I took a class where we talked a lot about like Viking, not quite the full religion, but a little bit of the like philosophy towards like life and death and stuff like that. And I remember in the class, everyone was just like, wait, everyone was happy about it was preordained that the world was going to end, you were going to die. And everyone was just like, yeah, no, this is good. And everyone was really confused about that. But like that does work very well in tabletop RPG. Everyone is like just sort of accepts and is happy about, yeah, all right, I'm one throw of the dice away. That's fine. Like that actually does work quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even the idea of Viking, the verb to go Viking, is we go somewhere on an adventure, usually in violence to acquire something. And so that by itself is classic adventure paradigm, but in cyberpunk, it's like, okay, we're the guys who take on the runs, we do the jobs. We go somewhere, and accomplish something for fame and for glory and for renown and for a little bit of cash.
Always for a little bit of cash. Can't be a Viking without wanting something at the end of it. So yeah, no, that's really exciting. And again, if you backed the S5E Kickstarter that Sigil ran, obviously you should have, so congratulations. But that will be at some point coming out as a jumpstart to those rule sets, so you can be using the S5E system for that, which is exciting. And I've obviously played a lot of the system. It would serve itself very well to this world of mythology and powerful beings that have the ability to change the fortunes of their world. How exciting is that? There's a tagline right there.
There you go.
Anyway, Ellen, I know you had some questions. I keep talking.
Yeah, so I mean, most of what I wanted to start with was just talking about kind of well, actually, I know that you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about for upcoming VTT that you're currently working on.
Yeah, I mean, VTT is rolling along well. Our big project right now, Peg already teased it out, is Riffs for Roll20 and Foundry. That's a big property. It's right up there with Deadlands, Pathfinder in terms of support from fans and backers and Kickstarters and those kinds of things. It's also a complicated property because it takes Savage Worlds and adds a couple of extra layers onto it. So we've had to do some things in the background, tweaking systems, tweaking, on Roll20, tweaking the character sheet to be able to accommodate these things. And so there's been a lot of under the hood stuff that's been necessary to make this possible. So if you're a Foundry user, for example, you notice one of the most recent updates to Suede for Foundry was that, now you can add toughness to armor without having to do a lot of rigmarole around that. And so why is that? Well, because that's a pretty core principle or way that armor works in the Rift setting. So that's been, an interesting journey and very, very exciting. It's personally my jam. Like that's what I play all the time with my people. So I'm super, super stoked about making it happen. And having a fanboy on the project, I'm sure, is both annoying and helpful to the rest of the team.
I think helpful more so. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about actually quite a bit in the VTT is how important it is to have somebody who just knows the rules backwards and forwards, so you can have somebody to go to and be like, is this okay? Is this going to screw things up? And they can go, oh, yeah, chapter 10, that's, yeah.
And enjoys it, too. Not just knows the rules, but, like, is passionate about it. I feel like it's so funny. We see in general, I don't want to over-exaggerate the term, but like the fall of franchises, with the idea that these big institutions that have existed for so long, whether they be movie or comic, and oftentimes when this next sequel comes out, this next comic, this next movie comes out, there are so many glaring issues that if a fan was there sort of being like, well, no, you can't have Darth Sidious come back. Is that his name? Dark whatever. The Star Wars dude. He's like, you can't have him back because it doesn't make sense to the lore. It's like, yeah, you know what? There's a certain amount of, that would be frustrating as a director. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, maybe having somebody who's passionate about this world, passionate about the system, knowing what they want in the end game, knowing that usability is clutch in this and this and this, would really sort of streamline some of the ideas that you're looking to incorporate or cut them out entirely. You know what I mean? Sometimes people, especially when it comes to the front end decision makers that are like, oh, what we need a more streamlined way to do this. And then somebody who actually uses it and plays it and loves it might be like, actually, you don't. 90% of people, when they do this, love rolling this separately and picking this separately. You know what I mean? Oftentimes, automations like that can actually work against the overall product, I find, at least.
Yeah, and automation's a tricky one in general. Our function or our policy, I guess, or approach to automation is we want it to play like it plays at the table, and anything that automates has got to be optional, right?
Yes.
So, we don't want to force people down an automation track if they don't want to use it. So you find our Foundry module and our Roll20, they're nice quality of life enhancements, but they're not, you click it and it just does everything almost all the way to the level of video game. And of course, automation's a spectrum. VTT by itself is an automation by definition. It's taking the rules and making them work by computer for you. But how far down that spectrum do you want to go? And our philosophy so far is we still want people to roll dice and look at the rules. And particularly when we're dealing with Savage Worlds as a system, it's very flexible, covers a lot of different settings, has a lot of different kind of narrative options. You want to leave a little bit of space for Game Master players to.
And I think that's important. Like for me, I know personally, and I mentioned it before on the show, but I always, when I'm using a VTT, I will still always roll dice in real life because I like the tactile feel and I need to justify buying more. So that's always going to be the way I run. But and it's funny, I'm not sure if the two of you play many board games, but there's a board game called Descent by Fantasy Flight Games. And it's a fun sort of dungeon crawl, and they've done now the first and second edition, and they've recently released, I think in the last 6 months, a new version called Descent. Something in the Dark.
Oh.
What's that?
Descent into Madness.
I wish that'd be more Lovecraftian. No, it's like a very fantasy game. But what they've done is they've incorporated a tablet almost entirely. So you use the board minimally, but the tablet calculates your rolls, it tells your story, and it does 90% of the work. And the biggest complaint they had, and the game is doing fairly well, but a lot of people are like, well, this just takes the whole tactileness out of it, is they automated too much. They made too much dependent on the tablet. Too much of it needs to exist and function, and even the searching mechanics and some of the cards and the damage you do is all through the tablet. And the board game essence sort of gets lost. So I agree, and it's always about that sliding scale. It's always about balancing that. And I think a lot of role players get turned off at the idea of VTTs because they don't fully understand that they're only doing the things that you choose them to do. You're not sitting down and everything is automated unless you want it. You can pick and choose. And I think that's an important lesson for many people to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few board games, I really love playing that, and I got the iPad version or something like that. I play on the iPad against his computer or other people. And
well, it's interesting too because I started off. I've only gotten to role playing in the last 5-7 years or so, and to me, I started board games 10 years ago as well. Like I was gaming late in life. I never really got into it, and then board games, I was like, oh my god, board games have gotten so cool. And then 3 years into that, I was like, oh man, these are so restrictive. And then I realized, oh wait a minute, RPGs are the one that if you want to be an asshole and chip a hole into the wall of the dungeon with enough time, you can do that so long as the GM is willing. And every GM should be willing to have your players do crazy stuff like that. And that limitless aspect of it is what's so appealing. And I think it's so appealing to so many people. And wrongly, they can look at VTT as being a more limited version of that. But it's not, in essence.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I game twice a week on VTT. I use Roll20 one night and Foundry the next. And it can be limiting because there's a barrier to entry in terms of where do I click? What do I do? Where's the thing I'm looking for? And if you don't know the system in general, so you don't play Savage Worlds, for example, and you're learning a new user interface on a VTT, that's two big hoops to jump through. And if you're the game master, VTTs are a little bit more work because you have to actually do some prep sometimes. I mean, you can go and you can just roll the dice and flip the cards and do most things narratively from the seat of your pants. Absolutely no problem. But if you want to have a map or minis or whatever, then you're going to have to do a little bit of work. And that's the advantage of the products that we make. So we do that work for you.
Yeah.
So
all done.
Even just testing the module for riffs, for example, and having it in my Foundry or on Roll20, to be able to just look up a rule and not open my PDF, to be able to just drag a thing onto the character sheet and have it done. I mean, it really saves a ton of time. And the more time I save in that kind of technical prep, I can put it into story prep or live my life or whatever else.
Or building little die towers with your dice as you're waiting.
You know what you need for dice? They had those pixels. Did you back that Kickstarter, Alan?
I did not.
These like Bluetooth dice, and you roll them on your table, and they show up in the VTT, the result.
I heard about those. There's a few different versions of those, aren't there?
Materials is the other one. I think that's the one that my boyfriend went in on. He's more the gadget person than I am. I'm the source of, wow, I didn't know you could get that error. I'm that person. So I don't tend to go in on this is brand new, nobody's done this before stuff. I'm like, oh, well, then I'm going to break it. So I better not.
I thought it was great. I didn't back it. I'll wait till they figure it out, maybe buy a set or something. But it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart idea. And we've talked many times on this show about how we want to move forward in the world of VTT and what things can be implemented. And that was one of those things I think we mentioned before too, that was a really clever concept because there's only so much you can do. I feel like we're reaching the threshold of like where the virtual tabletop and the tabletop is kind of getting before it moves entirely to like virtual reality or something like that. You know what I mean? But this was an idea that I think was very surprising and very smart. So
I think even in a COVID world, obviously more people learned VTTs and played online, so that's helped. And there's some people who won't go back. I mean, everyone talks about like you can't beat the table, that's true, but I only play online now because I'm kind of isolated where I live and those kind of things. And so it's super for me. I think even if I played virtually, I'd still want that map because it's a heck of a lot easier than rolling something out or printing a giant map or something.
It's true. It is very true.
It's different. Like, I mean, if you're after that table feel of like, hey, we're all sitting down together and playing a game together, then yeah, nothing's going to beat it. But if you want the maps, if you want some of that, snappy automation and things like that, there's a different pace to playing it on VTT and stuff like that. And if that's what you're looking for, then nothing's going to do it better than VTT. It depends on what you're looking for. I really do think they're such different experiences.
I find the best experiences, or rather the easiest way to say bring a new player in, is in person, because especially if they're a little bit confused about certain aspects, because I've played with younger people and they're on, and even though they know the technology, they're kind of like, oh, where do I roll? What do I do? This. In which case, I'm wishing that I could just lean over them and be like, okay, there's your AC. This is what you roll. You know what I mean? So like I think for experienced gamers, especially that have been doing it at the table for years, especially as we're getting older and we have families and it's tougher to get away, to a house half an hour away or farther. Absolutely. It's like pivoting, because now it's like, cool, I'm just going to lock myself in the office for an hour on Tuesday nights. Don't worry about it. 100%. But when it comes to that younger generation trying to learn it, it's so much easier to have that tactile, like, plus I think it's more appealing too as a younger player. Not talking like infant, but like as a 10, 15-year-old moving around these pieces, hearing the clack of the dice. And that's the stuff that as older gamers, we sort of take for granted, because now it's easy for us to be like, okay, well, we did enough of that. I've painted my minis. I've had fun. Now I just want to play the game. Whereas I feel like onboarding is still required for the younger generation to get that feel, because that was the appealing. And Stranger Things and all those kind of shows play that up, because when people see Stranger Things and they're like, oh, I want to try D&D, they don't give a shit about the combat and that's not what's appealing to them. What's appealing to them is the minis and sitting around and drinking pop and having snacks, just as it was with us when we were younger. So to me, that's where that space still exists. People who are excited to kind of get back out there and try that aspect.
Oh, I think it will never be replaced. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
as it shouldn't.
I was at the playground with one of my kids the other in the summer, and this dude had his Warhammer 40K fantasy book or whatever it was, Warhammer Fantasy hardcover book at the playground. He's like 11, 12-year-old kid, and he's like,
amazing.
All his buddies are playing, and he's like, and I'm like, I want to be your friend, but if I talk to you at the playground, I'm just a creepy old guy.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh man, can we talk about 40K? And the kid's just like,
I've never played before. Cool. What's this system? Can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
No, that's it's true. And like even my son, who's only 4, turning 5, the idea of role playing, even in just like a casual way where we're talking, he is so into it to the point where he's like GMing us. He'll be like, oh, should we play Dungeons and Dragons? And he'll like draw in crayons like a tiny little grid and like moving. But that tactile stuff is the stuff, because I've shown him. What the hell is it called? Oh, Tailspire. That virtual tabletop that's really chunky and kind of lets you see the fingerprints on the stuff. And I've been like, oh, do you want to like play your little story on this, because I can make it look like an actual swamp? And he's like, nah. And he goes back to his crayons and like the minis and the dice, because that's the fun, that's the toy aspect, and we're all children at heart. So
then we get older and realize we can't draw, and then we go on BTT.
Well, that's it. And I mean, like, anyone who plays RPGs, I don't care what age you are, but everyone has that child still in them, because I don't think you can pretend to be an elf from Neverwinter without being a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Like,
the kid wearing their parents' bathrobe jumping down the stairs. Like,
exactly.
You gotta be that kid.
You have to, which to me is also one of the things I love about the RPG community, is I don't care how tough you look or how like maybe cold you are with, responses, or how like standoffish you seem. I know that you still pretend that you're an orc named Gur or something like that. So you have to be a goofball deep down. Like, there's just no way you can't hide that. It's a reality of being in the role playing world, which is so disarming in a way,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's my people for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've met people at conventions, these like big, strong, tough looking people, and people give off an aura at times, but they're wearing a D&D shirt, so I know. I'm like, okay, yeah, you've definitely
there's a geek in there somewhere,
for apples. Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, there's gonna be that. Like, we have similarities here, my friend. So you have a few products that you can find on Drive-Thru RPG. Some stuff. I'm curious if there's anything that jumps out. I know a lot of these are for Savage Worlds, obviously, but is there anything that you're particularly excited?
Yeah, I publish in the Savage Worlds Adventurers Guild a lot. What would I be excited about? Well, my bestseller is just one simple arcane background called Petromancy. It's about using gemstones for magic in Savage Worlds, and
that is cool.
It's very popular. I think it's a gold bestseller on Drive-Thru RPG. And,
nice.
People have reviewed it well, and I think what's neat about it is it's not system agnostic, but setting agnostic. So you can just take that if you have a homebrew, or you just wanted some additional thing. It includes a one-sheet adventure, a couple pre-gens, and some rules for that. I'm a big fan of Titan Effect, which is setting for Savage Worlds. That's kind of this modern psychic super spies, that uses superpowers. And the folks at Knight Errant Media who publish that allow you to publish in their setting on the community fan license, or the swag license. And so I do have one adventure there called Hard Exit. That's it's just really cool. It has you ever see Behind Enemy Lines, that old movie? I think Matthew McConaughey was in it or something. And
Behind Enemy Lines with Owen Wilson and Gene
Owen
Hackman.
Wilson, is that who it was?
Yeah.
I've
seen Behind Enemy Lines.
Got that kind of feel of, you're trapped behind enemy lines, got to get to safety. And that one's really fun. It includes a lot of ETT assets. So in addition to the print PDF that you can print and use, I put in, JSON for characters for Roll20, tokens, a map, a bunch of different stuff like that, just to test that stuff out and get practice at it.
Yeah. So I have a question. So I am not an Adventures Guild person on any system. They just don't do it for me. How is the Savage Worlds Adventures Guild? How is that structured? And I guess what is it that you're looking to get out of it when you join those sorts of things?
Well, in this case, it's a community content program on Drive-Thru RPG. So like the Dungeon Masters Guild or the what's the Warhammer one called? The Vault or something. Mm-hmm. So you can publish a limited license Savage World stuff. So
gotcha.
That's kind of what it is. So these adventures, you assume you have Savage Worlds, and we can reference certain game terms, but not a bunch of them. And you can sell it, and you don't have to be like an official licensee. So that's kind of what these little guilds that you do. So for me, I'm not an ACE publisher. That's what Savage Worlds calls their licensees. Sigil is, and there's advantages to that. But for just little one-off things like some adventures or that kind of random arcane background that I have no real plan for, something like swag is very useful. And you can sell on Drive. You don't make very much, but it's more just that it's out there and people can have access to it. So in Savage Worlds terms, you have a fan license, which you can publish just about your own homebrew content on the internet, under certain restrictions. Then this is the next step up. You could actually sell it a little bit, and Peg takes a cut, Drive-Thru takes a cut, and you take a cut, kind of thing. Gotcha. And then the next level up is full licensee.
Okay, so that's different than I was imagining then. Mm-hmm. That makes sense though. The horrors of licensing.
Yeah, it's just a way for fans who aren't really like, I'm not going to be a publisher, I'm not going to own a company, I'm not going to publish a full setting. I might work with Sigil to do that, or I do some writing.
I was going to say, you never want to say never.
I work for Peg to do some writing as well, but I usually work through others. I'm not the license holder.
Is there any exciting projects that you have been, sort of percolating on that you're hoping to do something with that we can steal? I mean, that we can talk about?
Can't steal anything. I think it was announced recently that there's a box set coming for Rifts, Terror on the Dark Frontier, and I've been working on some of the content for that.
Nice.
So that'll be interesting. That's by Pinnacle. I have a couple of Nine Worlds was just designed as a mini setting, so there's not a lot of world info. It's an adventure, it's some pre-gens and enough world info to get you going. I think Aaron would like to see it be a full setting, so we'll see. We'll talk to him about that as things go along.
There's a document somewhere.
He can write it. And I'm just kidding. And I have a bunch of stuff like that I'd like to put in Savage Sign of I like just making stuff and then kind of moving on. So I have some other settings that are like a dystopian future. And that's really neat, where people are displaced through time and space, and then they all end up in this one refugee city that the world builds, and all kind of adventure ensues, and other stuff like that. So I have some mini settings that I like to play around with.
That sounds exciting. I want to play around with it right now. It's wonderful, getting to sort of be in a position where you can have these ideas, and knowing that people like Sigil and Aaron specifically can kind of help you find a home for them in a way. Obviously, it's a very fortunate position to be in, but it's also, to me, sort of a testament of the community at large that with the nature of role-playing, so many people are keen and excited to hear your new idea. And I think no one has experienced that more than Ellen and I, with having people on every week, getting to talk about all their settings, whether it be like, Titan fighting, or motorcycle samurais, or, Viking cyberpunk. And each one sort of more exciting than the last, and each with their own sort of unique spin to make it something feel unique and on its own, or even familiar and comfortable, because I don't think there's a bad way to do it, you know, unless you're being offensive or something like that. Obviously that's a bad way to do it, but beyond that, it's a pretty wonderful space to be in terms of RPGs, when 90% of the community here's the next idea and they're like, oh cool, yeah, I'd play an orc in that, or yeah, cool, yeah, I'd chop off a horse's head and mount that. That sounded really weird. I mean to say, like, I was trying to think of, like, it's what happens when you talk and you're not thinking about what you're saying. But anyway, it's wonderful to have all of these ideas and get to see which ones sort of take flight and which people are interested in which.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And there's always that kind of scaredness, too, about putting an idea out there, you know, whether it's they call imposter syndrome or whatever it is, or just, you know. And so to have a community in a place like Sigil, but others, groups that I'm involved in, where you can put it out there and people are just like, hey, that's cool. And if there's something that needs to be fixed in it, they're just like, try this or try that, as opposed to, you know, like internet blow up flames.
Well, and that's it. Yeah. And I think the RPG community is massive, but the pockets are still relatively small, at least parts of it, you know, like Call of Cthulhu is a massively popular game, but you go to a Call of Cthulhu server or a Discord, and they're still going to be relatively small just because of the people who decide to get on Discord and talk at that time. And it's kind of nice in a way, because you do have areas that, despite how populous an RPG might be, you still can find a place to have a voice. Unless it's D&D, forget it. D&D, you're too big.
It's pretty big, I'm learning. I didn't know any 5e until S5e kickstarted, and then I had to learn it for 9 Worlds.
You got away with it for a long time, and now they got you, pulling you down. I mean, I love 5e personally. Again, because I came in late enough into the hobby that I wasn't soured on D&D, because I do think there's like a bit of you know, going against the grain to an extent, where, especially if you've been gaming for a number of years, where you're like, D&D, nah, I'll take some of the smaller stuff. But I think whether it be big or small or anything, I think everything has a place in the RPG world that you can enjoy. I don't think anyone should tell you what you can and can't play, or how you can and cannot play.
I've enjoyed playing it. I'd learned it fast and GM'd it. I mean, it was not hard to pick up. Pretty straightforward. I had good rules people in my games with me that I could quickly just go to them. Is that how that works? Or whatever.
That's my takeaway. My partner, she knows D&D so much more, so I'm just kind of like, literally on the Sigil stream, which we do Tuesday at 7:30, you know, because we're playing in the 5e world, I'll just be like, is that right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll often ask the table, is that the right rule? You know, although that's one thing I do enjoy about VTT. In Foundry, I have a little module, and I press Control Spacebar, and I type it in, and the rule comes up. So it's a lot better than stopping everything and looking through.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed 5e. The only thing I didn't like about it was, because I had come from a Savage Worlds system of bennies, where you can reroll things. I just found it sometimes so unsatisfying to like fail a roll and go like, oh,
that's it.
Now it's someone else's turn.
The bennies let you re-roll a roll?
Yeah, you can re-roll. Yeah.
I've only played Deadlands once, and it was about 4 years ago, and I can't remember it. I really liked it. I remember
They're
having
kind of like inspiration, only they flow way more freely.
Yeah, that I mean, honestly, you're right. And I think we had a guest on here once that made a really good point that I think stayed with me, where it was, any game that makes you lose a turn feels, it's not necessarily a bad game, which I think they were saying, but to me, the takeaway was that it's a failure on the mechanics, that it should make you feel rewarded. And I agree, because if there was one thing I don't like about D&D, it's the idea of, okay, I got 2 attacks and a move. I attack first one, I miss. I attack roll again, I miss. There's nothing else I can do about that. And if I'm in combat, I can't move farther away or whatever, because there have been a number of rounds where you're like, well, that's it. I guess my turn is over. And it feels like you're missing a turn based on a die roll. And I agree. I do find that frustrating.
That's one thing about S5e, is it adds more inspiration to the game. I think you can have as many as 3. And I think when we were playtesting, the first, we did it over 2 weeks, 2 sessions. And so I ran 4 sessions. At the first time, I didn't give much away. The second time, Gwen was like, hey, give more. So I did, okay. And then it made a big difference. Like, it just felt a little more furious, a little more people willing to do the crazy thing that you really think.
And I think that's it.
Enhanced Viking should do.
And I love it. I think inspiration is great, but I think the problem is DMs can be way too stingent with it. And I don't think they realize, like, to me, I give inspiration almost every game to everybody for whatever, whether it be an out-of-character joke or just a great, like, action combat, because I want to see people constantly rolling it and constantly doing it with advantage. And I totally agree. I think if there was a bank, like a 3 inspiration, or if you allowed the 1 inspiration to also do a reroll, I think S5e, or I think a 5e in general would be so much more. You know what, I'm going to do that. You just give me a new rule starting. I think that's it. I think I'm going to do it from now on. I think I give inspiration enough that I don't think they need to bank it, but I think I'm also going to allow inspiration to re-roll a failed roll, because I think that's such a great use of it. And I totally agree. I hate that feeling of, like, you know, failing a roll and saying, well, I guess I'll die now. Like, that's all I could do. Like, that's the end of my turn, I suppose. There you go.
Well, now you're giving out bennies. You're one step away from just converting over to
the problem is, well, yeah, D&D to me, it still has a special place in my heart, and there's a lot I like about Savage Worlds from when I played it. There were some things I didn't like, but there was a lot of things I liked. But I do remember that, hands down, I preferred the combat of Savage Worlds over the combat of D&D, but I preferred the role play, everything else of D&D to Savage Worlds. So.
Just make your own, like,
Shane's gonna throw
horrible
a boot at me.
Conglomeration of rules.
Yeah.
Just call it Savage
Dungeons.
I don't think Shane will throw a boot at you.
He'll throw a boot at me. Sorry, Shane. Anyway, yeah, awesome. I think we're just about done here. John, that was a fantastic insight to what you do, some of the products that you've done, as well as some of the views that you have on these systems. We really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you would love to sort of put people towards? If it is Petromancy, that's fantastic. I can drop it again. But is there anything specifically that you would like to send people towards?
No, check out our VTT modules from Sigil. I don't have any stake in the game, but I think they're good, and I use them every week when I play, and they make a big difference. Anyone who says I could do that myself in a couple of hours has a different definition of a couple of hours than I do.
Send us your resume.
Yeah, because that would be impressive. But the amount of hours it saves me as a GM is priceless.
Well, that's fantastic. So check them out. There's many ways you can check them out, but obviously the easiest way is through Sigil. So make sure you go to sigil.info, I think is our website, and you can find links to everything there. Thank you so much, John, for hanging out with us today. This was an absolute blast. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure to like the video, as well as follow John on any of his socials, as well as check out any of his products on DriveThruRPG. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and we hope you have a wonderful day as well. Bye-bye!